live. Oh,
you're live! Yay!
Wow, yay! Computers can work. It's such a nice thing. Oh, we've only been trying to do this right since March. So today's challenge was getting this to come up live, and it did. So sorry I'm a little late. When I went to go live, it kept circling and circling and circling. So I went and reloaded the screen because, well, reloading the screen kind of made sense, but the computer didn't think so. So it's okay. I'm here now, and we're going to talk about D.B.T. And last week we talked about the what and how skills of mindfulness, and what to do to be mindful was participate, observe, and describe. And we talked about the how skills, which were non-judgmentally, one mindfully, and effectively. So that was last week's summary. And today we're going to start with talking about what is the stress tolerance skills. And I'm looking forward to that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start us off with a mindfulness activity. And the mindfulness activity I chose is, well, first of all, go ahead and close your eyes if you want to. Just relax on your breathing. Don't have to worry about inhale, exhale. Just focus on the breathing. Enjoy the rhythm it's at. Don't have to change it. And we're going to pretend we're at the river and we're sitting in the grass and the sun feels good on us and there's a slight breeze. And you observe that and what you're observing is that the boats that go by, we're going to make those your thoughts and feelings. And we're going to say that our thoughts and feelings are boats going down the river. Imagine sitting on the grass, watching the boats go by. Describe or label each boat as it goes by. Try not to jump on the boat. Just describe or label each boat as it goes by. Is it a thought? Is it a feeling? You're at the river, you're in the grass, and the boats go by. What thought is this one? What feeling is that one? Don't try to jump on a boat. Don't get caught on that boat. Just watch the boats. Okay, now open your eyes and come back to the room. I hope you enjoyed that exercise. I like that exercise. I find it sometimes challenging because for me, usually I'll get stuck on a thought. And today's thought would have been timeliness. And, well, let it go. The timeliness issue's over with. We got it resolved, and I'm here streaming with you guys. So, were you able to focus? Were you able to just focus on the boat and label it a thought, label it a feeling, and just let it go down the line? Or were you jumping on the boat like I was, jumping on the one that said timeless? And but I didn't need to because it's over with. So, just an exercise to calm the mind. So that's this morning's mindfulness exercise, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Today we will be discussing and starting distress tolerance, and I will write the words distress tolerance for you up on the board so you know what the topic is. Okay, so distress tolerance. That's today's topic. And what are the goals of distress tolerance? Well, the goal of distress tolerance is to survive crisis situations without making them worse. Key phrase there, and you'll hear me say this a lot while we're talking about distress tolerance. The importance of distress tolerance is to survive the crisis without making it worse. If you're in a crisis and all you can do is not make it worse, you are doing something positive for that situation. Okay, so without making it worse, it is a success. Is something to congratulate yourself for. So the first goal of distress tolerance is to survive crisis situations without making them worse. The second goal is to accept reality. So by accepting reality, you replace suffering and being stuck with ordinary pain, and you give yourself the possibility to move forward. When we are stuck, we are suffering. And by accepting reality, we're giving ourselves the possibility to move forward. Our third goal of distress tolerance is to become free. Become free of having to satisfy the demands of your own desires, urges, and intense emotions. You have to become free and make your own choices, to become free and not let your emotions rule you. So those are the three goals of distress tolerance: survive crisis, accept reality, and become free. Um, and the skills we'll be going over in the coming weeks are the stop skill, which we'll talk about today. Pros and cons, we'll talk about today if we have enough time. We'll be talking about the tip skill and your body chemistry. We will be talking about distract with wise mind accepts, self-soothe with the five senses, and improve the moment. So those are all skills that we address in distress tolerance. And today's skills will be the stop skill and pros and cons. So when do you use crisis survival skills? Okay. When or why? Well, first of all, you're in a crisis when a situation is highly stressful. And, highly stressful is different for different people. For me, if you would go on a scale of 0 to 100, some people are going to be highly stressed when it gets to 50. For me, I tend to be a 75 to 80. That's when it's a crisis situation for me. So when it's highly stressful, you're in crisis when the situation is short term. It won't last a long time. A crisis is usually a short term thing. It's not a forever thing. And you're in a crisis when the situation creates intense pressure to resolve the crisis now. So, that those are signs that you're in a crisis. So it's highly stressful, it's short term, and there's intense pressure to resolve it now. Sorry about that. My nose is just. Use crisis survival skills when you have intense pain that cannot be helped quickly. For example, for me, that would be if I'm having a migraine and it's intense pain and it can't be helped quickly, I gotta let the medication run its course. I would use some crisis survival skills to help me deal with the pain. You want to act on your emotions, but will only make things worse. Like if my fear or anxiety would get me to for example, my fear and anxiety have got me to actually go underneath the table. Well, I can't be effective from underneath the table. I can't interact with people. I can't manage a situation. I can't. So use crisis survival skills when you act on emotions, but want to make the situation worse. So acting on wanting to hide would make the situation worse. Or use crisis survival skills when emotion mind threatens to overwhelm you, and you need to stay skillful. If my fear or my panic would get me to the point of where I couldn't communicate, or I'd have problems breathing. I'd have a hard time being skillful. You're overwhelmed, yet demands must be met. You use crisis survival skills when arousal is extreme, but problems can't be solved immediately. So those are when you use your crisis survival skills. Now, things you don't use your survival skills for are for everyday problems, solving all your life problems, or making your life worth living. Crisis survival skills are temporary. They are to decrease the immediate high stress. They are to allow you to break the cycle of being at that 85%. That for me, the number is 85 stress level, so that you can not make the situation worse and use skills to go forward to de-escalate the situation. Example, let's say my panic is at an 85. What do I need to do? I need to be taking 3 deep breaths. And by taking those 3 deep breaths, I'm breaking the panic cycle. And I need to start doing a lot of positive self-talk. You got this, girl. This is only temporary. Panic doesn't last forever. Take 3 more deep breaths. Panic is temporary. Like I said, a crisis is a short-term thing, and the skills aren't used to solve your everyday problems. So that's what a crisis is and when to use your survival skills. So with that said, we're going to go into the first skill for distress tolerance. And the first skill that we talk about is the stop skill. And I love the stop skill. Let me put the word up here. STOP. I love the stop skill. I use it both internally, and I will verbally say it. The stop skill is probably one of the most frequent skills I use in D.B.T. It's one of the first skills that made sense to me in D.B.T. And I use it a lot. So here, I'll put it up here so you can see it. And the S stands for stop. The T stands for take a step back. The O is for observe. And the P is proceed mindfully. So that's what the stop stands for. So the S itself stands for stop. And when you say stop for the stop skill, don't just react. Stop. Freeze. Don't move a muscle. Your emotions may try to make you act without thinking. Stay in control. Okay, example, I feel panic for a panic attack coming on. I say stop. And literally, I don't move a muscle. I stay in control. I just yell stop. Okay, so the next part of the stop skill is the T. take a step back. Okay? So we take a step back. Take a step back from the situation. Take a break. Let go. Take a deep breath. Do not let your feelings make you act impulsively. Okay, so let's say my panic's on the rise and I just yelled stop. Frequently that happens, I'm driving. And let's say I'm starting to get boxed in by cars or trucks. So I say stop. And I take a step back from the situation. I take a step back from my vision tunneling in on being closed in. And I take a deep breath. Matter of fact, I take 3 deep breaths. And I do not let my feelings make me act impulsively, meaning I do not let my breathing increase. I do not tense up. I take a step back. So I've yelled stop. I've taken a step back from the situation. I've taken 3 deep breaths. I'm not letting my feelings act impulsively. The next thing I do in stop is the O, and that is to observe. So the next thing you do is observe. And when you observe, you notice what's going on the inside and outside of you. What is the situation? What are your thoughts and feelings? What are others saying or doing? Well, we'll continue with my driving situation, being boxed in by cars and trucks. So what am I observing? What's going on the inside? I want to tense up. My breathing wants to increase. My thoughts want to race. My vision wants to narrow. So those are my thoughts and feelings. What is the situation? It's temporary. I'm not going to be boxed in forever. Nothing's going to happen to me. We're still all going to stay in our lane. We're going to get to where we're going. So notice what's going on the inside and outside. People are driving. We're going together. That's what's happening. My mind has jumped into panic for some reason, and those are my thoughts and feelings. What are others saying or doing? I'm by myself, so others aren't really saying or doing anything. But let's say my daughter was in the car with me, she'd be like, Mom, it's okay. She's not stressed out, so why am I stressed out? So I'd be observing what's going on around me. And then the P in stop is to proceed mindfully. And when you proceed mindfully, you act with awareness in deciding what to do. Consider your thoughts and feelings, the situation, and other people's thoughts and feelings. Think about your goals. Ask wise mind, which actions will make it better or worse? So in proceed mindfully, we're going to act with awareness. We're going to be using our wise mind, whether we really realize it's wise mind or not, and what actions will make it better or worse. So when I proceed mindfully in that situation, I'm doing my 3 deep breaths. I'm telling myself this is only temporary. I'm telling myself that the panic won't last forever. I'm telling myself, I got this, girl. You can do it. This is temporary. This is how I'm proceeding mindfully, and I'm breathing, and I'm practicing good breathing techniques. So the P in stop is to proceed mindfully. So stop, take a step back, observe, proceed mindfully. Those are the steps to the stop skill. And I just talked you through how I use the stop skill when anxiety is going to happen. let's say I have a thought through my head of, okay, so I woke up a couple weeks ago and seriously, one of the first thoughts that went through my head was, I wish I wasn't here. And I'm like, stop. I caught it. I caught it. It was negative self talk. And I'm like, what the heck? Where'd that come from? So, what the heck, where'd that come from? I'm taking a step back. I'm looking at the situation. And I obviously wasn't acting on it. I wanted to know what was going from. So I was observing. I took a step back and I started observing what's going on the inside. Why is my depression acting up? Why am I feeling depressed? Um, so I was observing and what was going on. And while I was observing it, I noticed I was being frustrated with myself for my depression having broke through. And I realized that wasn't productive. At that moment, I had depression breaking through. So I proceeded mindfully by just sitting with my depression. Yeah, I got up and I started doing my morning routine. And, I knew it was just a temporary thing, that by the time I got to work, I would be so involved in what I was doing that the depression would definitely have been overridden. And it was. And I just happened to wake up that morning and my depression was in the forefront. I don't know why, but I used the stop skill. I caught the thought. I said, stop. I took a step back. I observed, like, where did that come from? What's going on? Oh, my depression's up. And I was mad at myself for that, but that wasn't productive. So I just said, hey, I'm dealing with depression right now, and proceeded mindfully by going on with my normal day. And that's another way we can use the stop skill. There's another way I use the stop skill. And as you notice in the stop skill, there's stop, there's take a step back, observe. Observe is one of our what to do, our what skills in mindfulness. Proceed mindfully is a how skill in mindfulness. So as you can see, mindfulness pulls through into the other modules of D.B.T. So, you're still using your mindfulness skills while you're using distress tolerance. So that's the stop skill, and that's what you do and how you use it. And like I said, it's a very powerful and simple tool to use. And my challenge to you is to use it. Stop, take a step back, observe, proceed mindfully. Use that for yourself. It really makes things much more manageable. Instead of the morning that I woke up with my depression being in the forefront, I didn't let my depression take over. I didn't get stuck in depression in the high levels. I'm like, oh, I'm depressed. Stop. I'm going to continue with my activities. I'm going to, be mindful. And I didn't let it turn into a distressful thing. So the second skill we're going to talk about today is pros and cons. And pros and cons is a really good stress tolerance technique, but it's not one you use in the throes of your distress. Pros and cons are something you use when you're going to be dealing with a stressful situation. Like, let's say you have to setting boundaries with somebody, like I'll just pick with my father. You know, setting boundaries with him. That could be dealing with my dad could be stressful sometimes. We weren't always the best of a relationship. so to keep everything on an even keel. So, a lot of times I was called fat, or I was told my hair was too long, or um, he would he would example, I'd walk in with a coffee in my hand and you don't have that kind of money, blah blah, and okay, so that kind of can trigger me. I don't like being yelled at. I don't like being pointed at. So pros and cons. I would do a pros and cons while I was driving down to Dad's house. Pro of acting on the crisis urges, the pro of resisting the crisis urges. Don't worry, I'm going to put this on the board so you can see it. You don't have to figure out how to write it out. So you use pros and cons. You use before an overwhelming crisis urge hits. So I would use pros and cons before going to Dad's house, before he was going to yell at me for, where's my eraser? Before he was going to yell at me for coming in the house with a coffee, before he was going to proceed to tell me how much weight I've put on. So when you do a pros and cons, okay, you got your box here. We got the pros, we got cons, okay, and over here we got acting on crisis urge, and we got resisting crisis urge. So the pros, we got a column, cons have a column. We got acting on the crisis urge, and we got resisting the crisis urge. Okay, so the pros of acting on impulsive urges, giving in, giving up, or avoiding what needs to be done. So the pro of acting on the crisis urge, my dad would tell me how fat and how much weight I've put on, how unattractive I am. So the pro of acting on the crisis urge I would yell and I would release. But if I would yell at him, I'd release the energy, the pent up anger I was feeling. So it's an immediate release. That's a pro. Doesn't mean it's necessarily the healthy thing, but that's a pro. It's a quick release. A pro of acting on the crisis urge. Heard. You hear my anger. You hear how I feel. Doesn't mean it's effective, but it means I'm heard. A pro of acting on the crisis urge. I'll just leave those two for there. Now, what's a pro of resisting the crisis urge? I'm not an emotion mind. Not hot. I should say not mood dependent. Not mood dependent. Which means I won't, which means that the I'm not mood dependent. It means I'm not going to go with the wanting to yell. So I'm not mood dependent. A pro of action crisis urge is I get to be reactionary. A pro of resisting a crisis urge is I get to be proactive. I am taking charge of feeling angry that I've just been called fat and etc. and whatnot. And I am going to say, I don't like being talked to that way. I don't appreciate you talking to me like that, Dad. Versus when I'm reacting, you said blah blah. I'm just reacting. Versus I am not going to be mood dependent. I'm going to be proactive. In resisting a crisis urge, I'm going to be heard as well, but you're going to hear me and you're going to see you're going to see me draw a boundary. When my dad would do that, I'd be like, Dad, you keep that up, and I'm not going to stay with you today. I will cut the visit short and I will go home. And yeah, I was still frustrated. Yeah, I was still hurt, but I'm talking to him. I'm being heard, but I'm being heard with a message versus I release the energy and I'm yelling, and all you're hearing is an emotion. So pro of acting, pro of resisting. Now, the con of acting on crisis urge would be holding in an emotion, or suppressing an emotion. But am I really? Con of acting on crisis. The con of acting on crisis urge. I'm not reacting on the emotion. So just like here, I'm being proactive. I'm not reacting on the emotion. A con to not acting on the crisis urge. Those are the only two I can come up with right now. So we'll stick with that. So con of resisting the crisis urge. What's a con? What's a downside to resisting the crisis urge? I let the emotion be in control. Which is similar to release the energy, being reactionary. Boy, did I spell reactionary wrong. Sorry about that, folks. Con of resisting the crisis urge. That's the only one I can really think of right now. So that's the pros and cons of reacting to my dad when he was telling me all those crazy things about me. They were his opinions. I wasn't going to change them. I wasn't out to change them, but that's how you do a pros and cons. And as you can see, the pros of acting on the crisis urge and the cons of resisting the crisis urge are kind of similar. And they'll always play out that way. Just like the cons of acting on the crisis urge and the pros of resisting the crisis urge may be similar to one another. So when you do a pros and cons, remember, pros are you down and cons are you down, and acting on the urge is on top and resisting the urge is on the bottom. That's how you make a pros and cons table. So you use pros and cons anytime you have to decide between two courses of action. An urge is a crisis when it's very strong, when acting on the urge will make things worse in the long term. Make a list of pros and cons acting on the crisis urges. These may be to engage in dangerous, addictive, or harmful behaviors, or they might be to give in, give up, or avoid doing what's necessary to build a life you want to live. Make another list of the pros and cons resisting the crisis urges. That is tolerating distress and not giving up. And then and that's the grid below and how it sets up for pros and cons. So, make a list of pros and cons. This is to help you so that you don't engage in the harmful behaviors, in the dangerous behaviors or addictive behaviors. Like with my dad, I would have been dealing in harmful behaviors. Me yelling at him would have been harmful to our relationship. I'd have been disrespecting him. He was disrespecting me. It wouldn't have been, it would have closed down the relationship. I'd have been giving up on the relationship. Avoiding the crisis urge was definitely a good thing, because in avoiding the crisis urge, I wasn't mood dependent and I was proactive and I was heard. And you saw me draw boundaries. Dad, I don't appreciate you talking to me that way. Dad, that makes me angry. Dad, I will leave. I really don't want to talk about this anymore. Would you please not talk about that? Would you please not talk about me that way? Those were all things I came up with for resisting the crisis urge. Acting on the crisis urge, yelling, let them know I was mad, saying things like possibly regret. Quick release felt good in the very short term, but not productive. Not productive for me as a person. Doesn't leave me feeling good about myself to act that way, and being disrespectful to the other person. So pros and cons are something you would use before an overwhelming crisis urge hits. And let's say, so I made my pros and cons list. I'm going to go see Dad, and I know what he's going to say. I know what he's going to do. I go over it. I go over and make sure that I behave in the best interest for me, in his best interest for him. That it comes out to be a good situation. So review your pros and cons, get your list, read it over and over again. Imagine the positive consequences of resisting the urge. Think of the negative consequences of giving into the crisis behaviors. Yelling, negative consequences. Shouting, disrespect, negative consequence. Remember past consequences when you've acted on crisis urges. In the past, in my younger years, that would lead to me not being with my dad, not visiting my dad, not being part of his life. So, not a very good thing. So, resisting the crisis urge was definitely more powerful in a more productive way, because even though, he may have pushed that button again, we worked through it. And we worked through it again and again and again. Because, like I said, I wasn't out to change him. And but I was going to change how I reacted to my dad. I was going to be much more productive. I wasn't going to let my emotion carry me away. I wasn't going to stomp out of my dad's house angry. Um, you know, and I'd be more angry with myself for how I reacted. No, 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 no. So, pros and cons. Like I said, the important thing with the pro and con is that you do it before the overwhelming crisis hits, and you practice it. You go over it again and again. So when the crisis does hit, you know how to react. You know how to act on it. So pros and cons. I do use them. It's not necessarily a go-to skill. A go-to skill for me is the stop skill. The stop skill is definitely a go-to skill for me. I use it a lot and constantly. Pros and cons. I won't say it's a go-to skill for me, but if I do find a difficult situation, I do write a pros and cons, and I do practice it. So there is validity for the pros and cons skill as well. So I will leave you with those two skills today. That was quite a bit. We talked about what distress tolerance was, when to use distress tolerance. We talked about the stop skill and pros and cons. And I appreciate everybody who joined me. My challenge for you is to use the stop skill. My challenge for you is to write a pros and cons of things that aggravate you. So, and I wish everybody a blessed day and have a good time. And next week, we will talk about distress tolerance, and we will talk about tip and paired muscle relaxation. So, and possibly go into distracting, but we will definitely be talking about tip and paired muscle relaxation. So, thank you for your time. Thank you for being here with me, and I'll see you next week. Bye.